but everyone knows they have to be here for bylaws. Yeah, okay. Good. All right. Sorry, I'm waiting for my computer to load, but while I am, I will call this meeting of the Standing Committee on City Finance and Services to order. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. We thank them for having cared for this land and look forward to working with them in partnership as we continue to build this great city together. I also want to take a moment to recognize the immense contribution of the City of Vancouver staff, some of whom are here with us today, who work hard every day to help make our city an incredible place to live, work, and play. Clerk, may we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Stewart, Councillor Carr, Councillor DeGenova is in the chair, Councillor Fry, Councillor Swanson, Councillor Hardwick, Councillor Weeb, Councillor Boyle, Councillor Dominato, not in the chamber, Councillor Bly. In the chamber, Councillor Kirby-Young, not in the chamber, you have quorum, Chair DeGenova.
Thank you very much. I'll go over the plan for the day. A reminder that today's meeting is required to end at 1 p.m. as some councillors are traveling to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Conference in Quebec City. I hope you all have a wonderful time. I will not be going this year, but I hope you have a great time. We have 4 reports on the agenda today. Speakers can follow along on Twitter at Van City Clerk for updates on the progress of the meeting. Any comments on agenda items can be sent to council using the web form on the city's website. The link to that form will be tweeted out on @VanCityClerk. For everyone's information, at the March 13th, 2019 City Finance and Services Standing Committee meeting, Council agreed to consider suspending and varying certain provisions in the procedure bylaw for the regular Council and Standing Committee meetings during April and May as a part of the Council Meeting Procedures Pilot Project. The idea is to test a series of possible changes to the processes of Council during the Council and Standing Committee meetings and help determine their feasibility. On advice from staff, we will continue with the pilot project until the end of July. In order to implement the Council Meeting Procedures Pilot Project, Council must suspend certain rules contained in the procedure bylaw at each meeting. We will move motions to suspend certain rules as needed throughout the meeting. As chair for this meeting, I'm suggesting for reports that have no presentations or consideration items that we adopt the recommendations collectively in a single motion. There are no presentations and no speakers currently registered for agenda items number 3, 2019 cultural grant allocations, community arts, cultural infrastructure, and item number 4, contract award for consultant for Arbutus Greenway character zones 3 and 8. Does any member wish to hold either of these reports for debate or questions of staff? Oh, just a moment. Let me get your microphone on there. Councillor Carr? Yeah.
Sorry, my panel doesn't seem to be working. Could you hold I'd like to hold number 4, please.
Number 4, okay. And I don't see anyone else in the speaker's queue. I'm looking around just in case because my computer wasn't working before either. Nope, I don't see anyone else. All right. Does any member wish to declare a conflict of interest on any of the other items and have that item voted on separately from the rest of the consent agenda? Councillor Dominato. Just a moment. I'll get your microphone's on, yes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just with respect to the 2019 cultural grant allocations, there is a grant I believe to the Kettle Society, and so just in an abundance of caution, I will recuse myself from that item. I've indicated on a number of occasions that I would do so for up to a year, so till the end of June.
Okay, and Councillor Dominato, is it your understanding that you'd like to have that specific grant voted on separately so you can participate in the rest of the
Yes.
votes? Yes, very
Thank you,
good.
Madam
I
Chair.
just wanted to make sure. So we will go through that, and I'm hoping the clerk can remind me as to would we be going ahead and doing that now? Just a moment, I'll just confer with Thank you. So what we'll do is we will go ahead and we will hold 2 votes. So the first vote, Councillor Dominato, you can vote on, and we will section out the Kettle Society grant for that. And then the second vote, you can declare a conflict of interest. You've already declared a conflict of interest, and you won't participate in that vote. Could I... thank you very much, Councillor Carr. Accept the Kettle Society. Thank you very much. Councillor Dominato, is that a holdover?
That's a holdover.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else on to speak? No? All right. I'm going to call for the vote then. Please vote on screen. Okay. I'm going to ask to vote assist for me there. Thank you. Perfect. And all right, and that passes unanimously in favor. And now we're going to hold the second vote. And Councillor Dominato, you're going to conflict out for that vote, I understand? Yes. So this will be, it'll be very quick. And this vote will be held specifically on the Kettle Society. Oh, sorry. I do need a mover for that. Thank you very much, Mayor Stewart. All right. Seeing no discussion, we'll vote on that now as well. Perfect. And we have all councillors in favor, and Councillor Dominato has declared a conflict of interest on that. Okay. We've gone through that. We need a motion to adopt the recommendations contained in reports. Well, actually, no, we don't, because we have already voted on one and one has been held. So nothing, or sorry, we need a motion to adopt the recommendations contained in reports. We just dealt with reports 3, and reports 4 was held by Councillor Carr. Just one moment. I'm just going to confer with the clerk on this one right. Okay, sorry, voting twice on that threw me off a little bit, but for this meeting, we need a motion to suspend rules 13.8 and 13.9 in the procedure bylaw. Those rules permit members of the public and council members to speak for up to 5 minutes. Suspending the rules will mean speakers have 3 minutes each to address council, and council members will have 3 minutes for questions and answers of speakers. Would someone like to move a motion to suspend rules 13.8 and 13.9 in the procedure bylaw for the duration of the meeting? Thank you very much, Mayor Stewart. I read it out just so everyone hears me. Perfect. And I don't need a seconder, although it's in my script here. I do need a seconder because it's procedure bylaw. Thank you, Councillor Dominato. All in favor? Just by show of hands. Any opposed? Seeing none, that passes. If council members have questions to staff, please limit them to 5 minutes, including answers. And of course, you are always able to email them to staff as well. And item 1 is the interim report, Women's Equity and Transgender Variant and Two-Spirit. Staff from Arts and Culture and Community Services, Engineering Services, and Human Resources are here to provide a presentation to council. Thank you very much, and I see Ms. Singh is here.
Sandra Singh, General Manager, Arts, Culture, and Community Services. So this is the table of contents for today's presentation, and I'll just offer some opening remarks. Equity, cultural equity, racial equity, gender equity, intersectionality, and accessibility are all concepts and practices that aim to create fair and full participation in the social, economic, civic, and cultural lives of our communities. Equity asks us to better understand who benefits from the policies, programs, investments we make in Vancouver. Equity also asks us to understand who is at the table to inform decision-making and who makes decisions. Intersectionality calls on us to recognize the interconnected nature of social identities such as race, class, and gender, and how they may compound discrimination or disadvantage. Equity and intersectionality go hand in hand and require us to move away from one-size-fits-all solutions. In practice, the Canada Council Equity Policy has identified that achieving equity is not simply about treating individuals or groups in the same way, but may require the use of specific measures to ensure fairness. To do this work, it is critical that we and organizations seeking to ensure equity constantly re-examine our underlying assumptions, our practices, and the ideologies that knit together and are subsumed to create the status quo across society, in our communities, and in our organizations. The city has a long-standing, wide-ranging, and necessarily evolving commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. This work extends back decades and across councils and administrations. With each successive generation of leaderships, both at the governance and operational level, confirmation of the importance of this work, we have the opportunity to learn more, deepen our understanding, apply new lenses, and become more nuanced. Like all public policy work on complex issues, our perspectives evolve over time. As we hear from people with lived experience and other stakeholders, connect with community organizations working on the ground, liaise with other jurisdictions, learn from new research, and see the impact of previous decisions, the lenses we turn on our present situation and challenges sharpen, as does our reflection of both our distant and recent histories. Our work on equity at the city is both external and internal. External as we work with communities on initiatives and strategies, internal as we look to our own practices as local government and as an employer. Council's recent decision around representation on council advisory committees is an excellent example of a critical governance rethink about diverse representation on these important leadership vehicles for civic engagement. Equity asks us to understand who is at the table to inform decision-making and who makes decisions. Other current initiatives include Council's direction to authentically engage with the spirit of being a city of reconciliation, the commitment around Chinatown transformation as an outcome of the apology of historic discrimination, and then the work with Hogan's Alley Society to restore critical community presence and identity. Also, we are working on the development of an equity framework to bring consistency to our work and the development of an intersectional toolkit as part of this framework to ensure we are bringing an intersectional lens to our work and decisions, with the intent to deploy these tools throughout the organization, supporting staff to apply them internally and externally, and introducing these tools to the various advisory committees so that these lenses are applied on all areas of city consideration. When ready, this work will be brought to Council for review and hopefully approval, and we see this framework as a way to start to ensure systemic change. While there is a lot of work still to do, and we recognize that it is not always as fast as we would hope, important work is well underway, setting new important stages for future endeavors. This morning, staff are going to present an update on two of our equity-related strategies, the Women's Equity Strategy and the Transgender Variant and Two-Spirit Inclusion Action Plan. These two pieces of work were the result of community leadership and engagement, a thorough review of research, and an open-minded analysis of past and existing practices. And while no strategy is ever perfect, the ongoing implementation of these two strategies have already resulted in important policy changes, practice changes, and space changes. It is important to note that these two strategies represent work across the whole city and so include actions that span our many business units and boards. The commitment and leadership of staff across the whole city organization has been critical, as you will hear in this presentation. That noted, I do want to recognize Ann Nickerson, Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion and Human Resources, who's played a key leadership role in the development and ongoing tracking of these two strategies. Ann will be presenting the update on them today. In recognizing Anne, I also want to recognize Andrew Niklicki, our General Manager of Human Resources, who created the space for this important coordinating work within his team and has been a champion for this work across the senior management team. And as part of today's presentation, you will also hear about the upcoming Women Deliver Conference, an exciting opportunity for us across Vancouver, across sectors, to both showcase local excellence and learn from women leaders and women-serving organizations across the globe. Cheryl Nelms, Deputy City Manager of Engineering, has been coordinating the diversity contributions to Women Deliver, and I'd like to recognize the importance of her leadership in maximizing this opportunity for our city. Cheryl will be presenting the update on Women Deliver, but I will. So without further ado, I will turn the podium over to Anne for the Women's Equity Strategy.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Good morning, Mayor, Council, members of public, and of course, staff. I'm very pleased to be here to speak to you regarding two of the strategies we are highlighting in this report. The equity-related strategies we're looking at this morning are the Trans, Gender Variant, and Two-Spirit Inclusion Strategy and the Women's Equity Strategy. I'll start with the latter, I'll start with the former. In July 2015, there was a motion that was brought forward supporting trans equality and an inclusive Vancouver. That was really looking at some of the excellent work that had been done by the Park Board, as well as by the Vancouver School Board, and work that was ongoing throughout the city. What the motion asked was for staff to really take a look at how we could learn from other work that was being done within Park Board and School Board, and build on the work being done within the city on a wider level. A very large consultative process was undertaken with a large number of stakeholders, staff, service providers, the LGBTQ2+ Advisory Committee, and Park Board's related steering committee. There was a consultant report that was provided by Trans Focus Consulting with a number of recommendations, including over 30 sub-recommendations. A year later, in July 2016, we came back to Council with a report with a number of recommendations, including for 5 particular quick starts and the formation of a staff implementation team. Ongoing, we have yearly actions that are organized as to 5 different pillars or themes, and we report back annually on these. So as I said, 5 pillars, which I'll go over in the next slide. We have 16 actions for the year of 2019. And we have a total of 9 departments leading them, as well as the Park Board itself. So the 5 pillars themselves, under which actions are organized: public spaces, facilities and signage, programs and services, human resources, communications and data, community consultation, and public partnerships. For 2018 to 2019, there's been a total of 16 actions identified, and you can see there what the progress is on each of them. We've got 6 completed, 7 in progress or on target, and 3 which are ongoing. Appendix A in your staff report does give a very detailed outline of each of these actions with content as well as current status on them. So what I've done in this report, in this section, is to highlight some of the key accomplishments related to each of these strategies. With the Trans, Gender Variant, and Two-Spirit Inclusion Strategy, one of the key accomplishments has been inclusive washroom and change room signage installed. The washroom signage has been installed in all city-owned and leased buildings. It's universal, functions-based designation. A communications campaign with corporate communications with key messages was developed with it as well. And as well in 2016, we started within the city, and there had been previously in Park Board, staff awareness information sessions as well. That is ongoing. 2 other key accomplishments. In the Park Board, there has been a TGV2S inclusion facilitator position approved, and that will soon be posted. And again, that's for Board of Parks and Recreation. That follows 2 previous temporary positions that had been there after an exemption by the Human Rights Tribunal to hire for those exact positions. And now we have a permanent position, which is very, very fulfilling to see. Staff training, over 1,500 staff have been trained in trans, gender variant, and two-spirit inclusion since 2018. We now include a component of this training with all our Respectful Workplace crew talk sessions that are delivered throughout the city. I'd now like to turn to the Women's Equity Strategy. In April 2016, a motion came forward from Council entitled Because It's 2016, Action on Gender Equity. There were 3 directives to staff in that motion, one of which that Council directs staff to work with the Women's Advisory Committee to establish a process to review the 2005 Gender Equality Strategy and to update it with an eye to successful approaches, integrating more recently adopted policy such as the Healthy City and the Mental Health and Addictions Task Force, and taking into account a change in both national and provincial context. A large project and implementation plan was created in conjunction with the Women's Advisory Committee. A public engagement strategy was developed. An online survey was launched in March of 2017 with a public engagement forum held the following month. And key stakeholders in the community and experts were consulted, research undertaken, and many meetings with key staff as well. The Women's Equity Strategy 2018 to 2028 was approved in January of 2018. Very similar to the trans, gender variant, and two-spirit inclusion strategy, the Women's Equity Strategy is organized, again, around categories or key themes. These priority themes include a foundational piece to start, and that's of an intersectional lens. As well, they include safety, childcare, housing, and internally related to the city's workforce itself, leadership and representation. As I've indicated, the strategy is a 10-year strategy up to 2028. We started the strategy with Phase 1 2-year actions for 2018 and 2019, and we'll be reporting back to Council in early 2020. There are 7 lead departments, although I have to say every single department, including Park Board, are very involved and very supportive of this strategy. For 2018-2019, we have a total of 18 actions organized under those 5 priority themes. 7 are completed, 9 are in progress or on target, and 2 are ongoing. And I'd like to refer you in the report to Appendix B, where you will find all of those actions outlined in detail with the status included there. So, key accomplishments under the Women's Equity Strategy. Well, under the priority theme of safety, we joined the UN Women's Global Flagship Initiative, UN Safe Cities and Safe Public Spaces. As part of that, there will be an audit conducted, a safety audit conducted under Arts, Culture, and Community Services. We also collaborated with community partners on a public campaign to raise awareness of gender-based violence. And this here is an example of one of the posters from one of the transit shelters. We also had an internal related campaign for city staff as well on the same topic. Under leadership and representation, we've consistently achieved our goal of 50% women new hires in leadership roles. These are exempt positions, pay band 10 and above. We've also trained all of our recruitment staff in unconscious bias, as well as offered it to staff throughout the city. We've increased our outreach to women in underrepresented roles. These include women in engineering, engineers and EITs, as well as firefighters, as well as IT technical positions, as well as trades and operations. We've indicated that by 2020, the proportion of female new hires in underrepresented occupations will be increased by at least 5% over the 2017 baseline. In Q1 of 2019, I'm proud to say that we have exceeded that, and we will be reporting back to Council on each of the specific indicators of these metrics, again, when we come back early 2020. Engineering Services has developed a robust diversity and inclusion action plan, which myself and my team and others in Human Resources and other departments have been involved in developing. And there's also been a new position approved in Vancouver Fire and Rescue Services of an Assistant Chief, Recruiting, Outreach, Diversity and Inclusion, who is here today with us as staff. Related to childcare, we've exceeded the target of 1,000 new childcare spaces by 2018, and negotiations are underway with the province on a capital funding agreement for childcare. Related initiatives, there is a lot of ongoing research that we become involved in as well, or previous to this Women's Equity Strategy in the past. For example, Women Transforming Cities Research Partnership. We signed a memorandum of understanding with WTC in January of 19 and with the Canadian Research Institute for the Advancement of Women. Our goal is to collaborate with regards to Women Transforming Cities and CREA's three-year research project entitled Action on Systemic Barriers to Women's Participation in Local Government. Engineering Services has also taken part in the UBC Project RISE Research Partnership, which is, we are one of 9 Canadian organizations to take part in this workplace culture survey to assess the culture experienced by female and male scientists and engineers. Research is continuing with a workshop planned for the fall with participating organizations. And last but not least, we have taken part in McKinsey's survey, which occurred in 2017. It occurred again this year in 2019. They have both a talent pipeline survey and an employee experience survey, which we've taken part in, and results are expected next month. So what are the next steps? Well, there's certainly a lot of ongoing work still underway related to the actions in each of these highlighted strategies. We look forward to getting meetings underway with the different council advisory committees, particularly, of course, the Women's Advisory Committee, the LGBTQ2+ Advisory Committee, and others, and we'll be launching Phase 2 consultations on the Women's Equity Strategy with them. We look forward to our regular updates to Council, and again, we'll be back here on the Women's Equity Strategy early 2020, and also the development, as GM Sandra Singh had mentioned, of an equity framework, including an intersectional lens. I'd like now to introduce Cheryl Nelms, Deputy GM of Engineering Services, who will be going over some slides on Women Deliver, which is just up around the corner. Thank you.
Good morning, Council. Cheryl Nelms, Deputy GM for Engineering Services. Thanks, Sandra, for that nice little uplift in my role, but I am the Deputy GM for engineering. So I do want to say that this is really exciting for what's coming up for the Women Deliver Conference, and I'm going to give you that update because it's happening next week, June 3rd to 6th. And Council, you've really taken a leadership role in terms of supporting women's equity by identifying $250,000 from our Innovation Fund in support for programming and related works around the Women Deliver Conference. So there's effectively like 4 streams of work that we sort of, if we have to sum up what's happening around the conference. But to start off, in terms of the scope of this conference, it's gone from, this is the largest women's equity conference in the world. It was originally identified to have 6,000 attendees. It's now at 9,000 attendees with a significant wait list. It sold out 2 months ago. There's going to be 500 media. There's 26 ministers from across the world that are going to be attending, the Prime Minister of Canada, and 3 heads of state, African heads of state, will be attending. Her Royal Highness Crown Princess Mary, the Crown Princess of Denmark, will be attending. 2 former presidents, 5 first ladies from the private sector, a number of CEOs from some of the top companies in the world, including Merck and Unilever, and then executive directors from a number of nonprofits like Oxfam and UNICEF. So in terms of like scope of this and attraction to our city, it's really huge. And illustrating when you have 9,000 attendees and a lot of support for local events, which there are a lot of satellite events that are happening around this event, it illustrates a demand and interest in women's equity. So we're using this as a city to really focus some of that international attention as a platform to profile the equity work. So we have a group really in partnership, really with the leadership of community services, working together to further what we're doing in the city for our equity work, and also provide a learning platform for some of our staff to attend these events, as well as the satellite events that are happening across the city. So the first off area is the Women's Legacy Housing Project. Just an update on that. You directed staff to investigate the scope for the dedication of a city site in terms of the development of a city site for women's housing project, as well as services for women and for women's building effectively, and services in the neighborhood. And so staff are currently working on that. Also in support of the conference, there's a large public event called Culture Night that's happening on Wednesday, June 5th. And that's led by Tourism Vancouver. We're one of the 6 sponsors of this large event. It's going to be from 5:30 to 8:30 at night. And it's a free outdoor event, and you can imagine that's where the conference participants, those 9,000 conference participants, sort of link in with our public locally. And Chantal Karaviasek will be the headliner for that event. And we also will have a Coast Salish welcome, as well as performances for the Culture Night. In terms of some of our city and community engagement work, we've partnered with the Vancouver Foundation and had matching funds for the $20,000 that we've put forward for nonprofit people from nonprofits to attend the Women Deliver Conference. So that's been very successful and well received by the community. We have a Women for Politics, so thank you, Council, for being willing to participate in that. I think that's great for the underrepresented area of women in politics, that there's going to be an event held in October, and we're launching the applications today. So if you can get out and Twitter and put on your Facebook pages a little announcement on that side, that would be great. And that's going to be a fantastic event where you're going to be partnered with some young woman to have a council experience and attract potentially individuals into politics. On honoring community sports champions, we have a new program that's been developed to really focus and honor citizens involved in community sports and whatnot. And what we have on Culture Night, 5 citizens will be receiving an award at Culture Night for basically making sport more accessible for girls and young women. And lastly, we're having volunteer opportunities for the Women Deliver Conference. Over 130 staff have been confirmed to be participating in the Women Deliver Conference and therefore being able to also attend. Lastly, the programming around the event is actually significant. We're hosting a large satellite event at the Vancouver Public Library. And that is going to be held over the course of June 3rd to 6th of the course of the conference. And there's effectively 4 panels of workshops that are being held. There's going to be over 20 sessions. And we're leveraging this with the Mobilization Canada work that's happening. So if you look on We Deliver website, you will also see our events and our workshops that are put into place. The first day is going to be focusing on women in business and leadership in the economy. The second day is really on resiliency, women in resiliency roles, and recognizing the interdependence on social and environment in that area. The third day has an arts, culture, and sport focus, growing strong women. And the fourth day is focusing around designing cities. We've made it very accessible in terms of offering childcare throughout this. We have one of our events will have ASL, American Sign Language translators, so that way we can have greater accessibility for that perspective in coordination with our UN Safe Cities work that Community Services is running. And throughout this, an exciting area is that we'll have an art exhibit. So our engineering services artist in residence is curating an art exhibit showcasing over 20 female artists that will be held, looking at the focus of designing cities, and that's going to be held over the month of June in the library. Other areas, we did have a family day that was held on May 11th, 4,000. That was the first time that it's ever been open to the public, our family day. And that's an opportunity for the public to come in, see what women in underrepresented roles and trades do. And that was extremely successful. Past years, we've only had 1,800 people of our staff come. This year, first off, it was 4,000 people and identified really as a successful event. So overall, great attraction to this event, lots of interest, and thank you for putting out some information on your Facebook's pages about the Women Deliver Conference and your participation in all of this in support for women's equity. Thank you very much, Council.
And there are some questions.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yes, of course.
Before we start, I really wanted to take a moment to call out the leadership of Cheryl Nelms. When Women Deliver was announced as coming to Vancouver, it didn't really fit into one part of the organization. We were trying to figure out who wanted to lead the charge, and Cheryl stepped up, and we had a steering committee, and the folks you just heard from have all really put in extra time. This type of programming takes a lot of time and energy, and I just really want to acknowledge the entire team, but in particular Cheryl. She led the steering committee for the activation around Women Deliver. So I just want to acknowledge that the leadership and thank everyone, all the staff that are here, for the creativity for really activating this event so that it really feels like it's Vancouver, lives in Vancouver, and really has a Vancouver flavor. So I just want to acknowledge the entire team for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really do appreciate that. I didn't want to preempt anyone. I know there are many members of the team, but I also know that aside from Women Delivers, which many of our staff members have worked on, that Ms. Nelms has put a lot of work and effort into that. And aside from that, is a role model in her field every day for young women who aspire to seek a career in engineering as well. So that's something that I know that we've heard across the organization, and I've heard from others as well. So thank you very much for your hard work on this and for your work every day, and to all of staff. I'll advance Councillor Carr for her up to 5 minutes of questions to staff. 3 minutes to speakers, but 5 minutes to staff is what I understand we have. Councillor Carr, questions?
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, thank you to the leadership and the incredible work that's going on around this. And I just wanted to also acknowledge former Councillor Ellen Wordsworth of Women Transforming Cities and the work that she's doing in the community. So my first question is around the goals of the Women's Equity Strategy. And I noticed that one of those goals is joining a UN Safe Cities program. And I'm wondering if we can't include the fact that the city of Vancouver has joined just this year, or it happened last year, but we're really formally involved now, the C40 Women for Climate. And I really think that it's something that we should be highlighting because as a city, we are partnering in a mentorship program. There's 10 women leading in the field of actually resiliency around climate in Vancouver, specifically housing, and 10 mentors, including people in the city, myself and others. And I would love to see us make that part of what we're doing. So is that possible?
Yeah, we'll take that away and look into it.
Oh, that's great. Good, thank you. The next report that you said would be back in early spring of 2020, that's when the mentorship program is also reporting. So it would be great to be thinking about timing in that regard. Thanks. My second is, I'm not sure if Madam Chair, I can do this, but I'd love to ask some questions of Ms. Wordsworth regarding the report or work that she's doing in partnership with the city and FCM, and specifically on involving more women in local civic politics, and whether there's any lessons learned.
Just a moment. Give me one moment. I don't want to put Ms. Wordsworth on the spot. Not only could she answer questions, but I wanted to give her the opportunity, as I don't see anyone signed up on the speakers list, if she wanted to speak, but if she wasn't prepared to speak or didn't intend to speak, but she can answer questions as well as have an opportunity to share some of her thoughts. That's what I was hoping to do, if you'd like, but I'm not sure if you'd just like to answer questions.
I would first like to echo the Ditto Managed comments about the staff work. I was just Skyped into an international panel at UN Habitat in Africa yesterday, and I cited the gender equity strategy and the gender variant two-spirited strategy as global wise practices. But I have to say that I am concerned that we are piecemealing the need for a city-wide strategy on gendered intersectionality for a women-friendly city. And the question of women running for elected office and electoral form are key to making women-friendly cities. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities does have this program, Getting to the Gate, to help women, but I would suggest the City of Vancouver could actually, as well as having that wonderful youth forum in the fall, could actually have training sessions here for women, self-identified women who are interested in running for office, nonpartisan, and also are getting out the vote for women and really discuss what electoral reform could mean, because the stats show that if you have wards or pro-rep, 8% more women get elected. So there's a number of issues around just that area of a comprehensive strategy that I think needs to be addressed.
That's great. If I could ask some questions?
Of course.
I think, yeah.
I wasn't sure which timer to go off of. I'll allow you a little bit of room, Councillor Carr. There you go.
Thank you. Yes, because I was one of the directors on the Canadian Women's Voters Congress, Nonpartisan Women's Campaign School, which is no longer running. There's a real gap in terms of campaign schools. So I think that I'd love to talk after or pursue that. I think that's a wonderful suggestion that you've made. Were there any lessons that you learned out of you've been going for a year in observing the most recent election in terms of involving more women?
Well, I think the glaring absence of intersectionality on council is what strikes everyone, and certainly such a Caucasian straight council, although
8 women, though.
8 women, all of you, mayor and council committed feminists, that's critical. And that's why I'm hoping that the city will develop a comprehensive policy, because you're all feminists and Women Delivers coming up. But we really need to engage the full range of citizens in Vancouver and see them reflected here in council. And I think that that's an enormous gap that we need to address through electoral reform, through picking up where the Women's Campaign School left off, and really working with other municipalities on some electoral programs that it would encourage women, and providing the on-site childcare for women who have young children and women who want to come and speak to council and understand how council works.
What do you think the major barriers are to getting more women, more diverse women of different ethno-cultural backgrounds elected?
Well, I know that some of the city staff did an outreach after the election to take a look at where the gaps were. So I don't know whether the staff reported back to council on their findings. Certainly we have been Women Transforming Cities has been discussing that with city staff, but I think it is an educational program that could easily be led by this mayor and council in the next few years leading into the election by doing educational workshops in the community around electoral reform and representation, so that citizens who are often working, and young women working 2 or 3 jobs, feel like this is within their reach. I think we also have to deal with the impact of social media on women's desire not to run because of the nastiness. I'm glad to see this council is a much more congenial council than previous councils. You seem to be listening to each other, talking, needing each other's votes, so listening. So I think that's an encouragement, but I actually think you need to start that work around reaching out to diverse communities and getting them to run. And I know Mosaic, I think, is talking to some of you about how immigrant and refugee women can engage, but we really do need to see a democratic representation of women on the long term, not this one-off outstanding representation of women, but without that diversity. This has got to be a long-term commitment.
And I'd love to hear more, but I've given Councillor Carr some extra time just to make sure, and this is a bit of an interesting situation. I was asked, and I did allow Councillor Carr to ask questions of Ms. Woodsworth, who's with Women Transforming Cities. But I was almost going to suggest maybe, so that Council, you also get your questions of staff, but we don't have to do the up and down for half. Maybe I could clear the queue, and then we could, I'm just letting you know my plan. We could ask questions of Ms. Woodsworth, and then we could ask questions of staff, because I want to give staff their own time. They've put a lot of work into this presentation and this report that comes before us. So with that, does anyone else have questions from Ms. Woodsworth? Okay, so I will clear the queue. Pardon? Clear the queue, and then if you put yourself on, Councillor Swanson, you had questions. It just then it makes it very clear about, and it's 3 minutes for anyone who's not staff. So there we go. Councillor Swanson, up to 3 minutes for questions of Ms. Woodsworth.
Thanks for coming. Can you tell us about the Feminist Deliver Conference and if it's being supported at all by the city?
Feminist Deliver is a group of 32 different self-identified women's organizations in Vancouver, very much led by organizations in the downtown east side. And it was developed in reaction to the inaccessibility of Women Deliver. Women Deliver costs about $600 American to attend. And there's a lot of women coming from the global south to discuss sexual reproductive rights and gender equity. And there was a real desire, especially of Indigenous women in the downtown east side, to be able to meet with these women. So we were able to start having meetings and got the support of some funding from the federal and provincial governments, and we'll be hosting this for 4 days at 312 Main Street. The morning of the 1st, June 3rd, will start with a live streaming of the Murdered and Missing Women's Inquiry final report that, of course, many of the women of the Downtown East Side were instrumental in getting started. At this point, I know that some of the women from Feminist Deliver were consulted about who should get tickets and the criteria for getting the free tickets that the city paid for. That was really outstanding. I know the social planning has been involved in some way, but I don't actually know the specifics of what the city has done. I know there's some feeling it's been mainly support from the provincial and federal governments, because Women Deliver is an international conference, whereas Feminist Deliver is a grassroots free 4-day conference. There will be a Feminist Deliver booth inside Women and Deliver, and there will be booths at the cultural event. And there is an invitation to Women Deliver to attend Feminist Deliver.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Swanson. Mayor Stewart, questions, Ms. Woodsworth.
Great. Thanks very much. Nice to see you again today. Thank you for all your work. So what struck me is I think equity on this council's pretty good. As I said, for me, it's the kind of balance that I think is working very well, except when it comes to intersectionality. So that's something we can work on. I do note, however, that incumbents do pretty well often in these upcoming elections. So if everybody runs again, this could be the composition of council for some time to come. However, what I am struck is at the regional level, there's a couple of things. First of all, when I sit around the TransLink table, is like all male mayors, all white male mayors, basically. But what I've noticed in regional boards is there's a resistance to the kind of work we're doing here at the city. So I, for example, managed to kind of force a gender equity lens in terms of future hirings at TransLink, but actually was surprised that met a bunch of resistance to that. So I'm wondering if any of the work that you're doing here in the city, the good work you're doing, is translating it all to the region, where I think we need real help when it comes to this kind of work.
Canada, unfortunately, is way back in representation at any level of elected office. FCM has done some good work at different times around diversity and gender equity, and right now they have appointed someone, Stephanie Huey, and the FCM will have a panel at the Canadian Pavilion on June the 3rd, and WTC has a representative on that panel sharing our wise practices. I know that Cheryl Nelms is trying to get across across municipality meeting, and we certainly, Women Transforming Cities has started to work in New Westminster, Surrey, and a number of other cities, but there is a lot of work to be done, and I think that Vancouver, as I said at the UN Habitat Conference yesterday morning, really has some excellent wise practices that the other can learn from. Although Ottawa's done great work, Toronto's done great work, Edmonton and Winnipeg are now doing great work, and Mayor Valerie Laplante in Montreal is doing good work. So maybe at the big mayor's conference there could be some discussion, because the Women's Committee of FCM meets for 1 hour during the entire 4-day conference. So there is a tremendous amount of work still to be done, although there are wise practices from many countries and cities around the world that we could learn from.
I just have 20 seconds left, but would there be any chance of the good work that your group is doing extending to the regional level at all? I mean, could we expect a regional report on the same kind of analysis you would do here at the city?
I would love to work with you on doing that. We have submitted, thanks to the invitation by Councillor Fry, who's the rep on UBCM, we have submitted a workshop proposal for UBCM, but it's a very competitive process, and I'd love to discuss with your office how we could do more on that front.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mayor Stewart, for sticking to time as well. Just before I advance, Councillor Dominato, I see staff wanting to maybe chime in, and you will have an opportunity to answer questions after for a full 5 minutes of each councillor. I just wanted to make sure that they got the full opportunity to ask you questions about your work as well. So, Councillor Dominato, questions to Ms. Woodsworth, up to 3 minutes. former
I
city
really did not expect to speak today. I just went in to support the.
If I do it for one, I have to.
It's
offer
your
it to
lucky
everyone.
day. Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. Great to see you again today. I'm just curious if you could offer your perspective on, in terms of the strategy about young girls and youth. I recognize that we, having been on school board, there's a role for the school board to play in terms of how we support young women and young girls. But if you wanted to offer your perspective on, from a city perspective, having been in the seat and in your work, how we better support young girls and youth.
Well, I think having the youth vote here in November, perhaps the C40 leaders, the partnership having a number of different events in council. The youth parliament used to meet here. I don't know whether they still do that. But getting a familiarity with government, and that government is very accessible, and I know that all councillors reach out to people when they go to various community meetings, but I actually do think, like the Getting Out the Vote campaign a number of years ago, we do need get out young people and women to consider running for council and to engaging and voting. It's a critical strategy that needs to be deployed and would need to be staff would need to start working on it. And I have to say, staff are doing amazing work with very little money. So in terms of the gender intersectional strategies, as the city manager just said, people are doing this, he didn't exactly say on the side of the desk, but we need to have dedicated staff working on all these initiatives to really get that comprehensive, deep intersectional strategy based in social justice with disaggregated data. Because how do we get out young women? How do we get out the Indigenous community? How do we get out the Asian community, which is almost 50% of the population now? So we see women from Asian communities represented at this table. So there's that kind of comprehensive strategy really needs a sitting down in a think tank and the funding for staff to do a comprehensive job on this. It's amazing what they've accomplished with very, very little.
That's great. And I guess just one last question. Staff have recently commissioned a report done by SFU students around looking at specifically nightlife, not the broader night economy, but nightlife. And one of the considerations that comes up there is women and safety. And I'm just wondering.
And transit.
So I'm wondering if you just comment on that from your perspective again around, and that comes up in many large municipalities as well.
And the fact that 51% of women don't own cars, 50% of women don't drive cars. So if you look at who works, 80% of the ridership of transit at night is women. They're the cleaning women, there's young women working in the bars, there's the sex trade workers. So public transit that's affordable and accessible and regular, and that people know that they can flag it down when they're in dangerous situation, proper lighting, etc. Those kind of issues are absolutely, the question of public transit is absolutely a women's issue, and as you said, particularly a young and immigrant women's issue as well.
And Councillor Dominato, you're over time.
Thank you.
I was trying to let you finish your sentence there, so thank you very much. I do have a quick question, and following up to Councillor Carr's question and Councillor Dominato's question, especially looking at young women and what we can do to encourage them. I had the benefit of attending Women's Campaign School. I think it was back in 2007. It was some time ago. I think Councillor Carr was the chair of the Canadian Voters Women's Congress at the time. Co-chair, sorry, and of the campaign school. I'm wondering, what else can we do? We have a mock council experience here for young women that we're offering. Are there other actions that you think we as a council, even as an example, can take?
Well, I think, we could have a youth week with all kinds of events here. I think school board and council could discuss together how they could develop some initiatives. I don't know that there's much in the school curriculum that actually encourages young people to get involved at the civic level. There's much more information in our school curriculum around federal levels of government. But for women, it's often much easier to get involved civically because they're not the long commutes. So I think we really need to think about that. We need to think about, there's some dynamite young people who get involved with campaigns, and in the end they don't vote. So that issue of getting out the vote, I think, is a critical one that probably will emerge in the upcoming federal election around the climate change initiatives that young people are leading these days. So we need that same kind of initiative led by mayor and council around getting out the youth vote and getting youth in the schools thinking about civic level of politics.
Okay, thank you. You've been to FCM, former city councilor.
Yes.
I've attended the women's breakfast. It's fantastic, but you're right, it's an hour, maybe my favorite hour. I'm not going this year, but to FCM. But I'm wondering, do you have any advice for me for the next time I go to FCM, or for others to consider that are attending that women's breakfast?
Well, I
how
think
they can move it forward at FCM or other levels, UBCM.
Well, I think
OMLPA?
I think it's very embarrassing that the Canadian Federation of Canadian Municipalities has 1 hour for women to meet, and I think your representative to FCM should be raising this as a serious issue, because whether you look at transit or design of the city, or you look at violence against women in this country is the only level of violence that is not decreased. But there's a need for a national housing program, because housing is such a critical issue for women, and that's tied to the invisible visibility of women's homelessness, et cetera. So we really do need to have the discussions at the UBCM, Metro, and the FCM. And certainly these two reports, to me as a woman and as an out lesbian, it's exciting to see the things are leaping forward, and now we need that comprehensive, fully funded strategy from mayor and council.
Thank you, and I have to hold myself to the same time as others. Councillor Wiebe, do you have questions for? Okay, just a moment. I'll just advance you onto the queue, and there you go.
Thank you. It's great to see what's happening on the political realm, but in the business realm and the private realm, I'm wondering what you think we could do. I know that my mom has Willow's Women's Clinic, and she's just removed women's from the title to make it more of an inclusive space. So I'm wondering what tools you think we could use to make more inclusive options, education to our small business community, to really ensure that their language and their communication out to the public and their understanding has this lens.
Well, I think this council knows that when it took the lead around the living wage and when it took the lead around childcare, that went to the Board of Trade, and we were able, many people have used the McKinsey report as sort of the gold standard on what businesses need to do, whether it's the mentoring, the spaces created, the need for childcare, the need of sharing of the unpaid work, the training. There's the McKinsey report 2017 on Canada was really a breakthrough report, but unfortunately, you can create these possibilities within your infrastructure, which the City of Vancouver is beginning to do in terms of its research hires at senior levels of government. But women are still going back home to that unpaid work. The overwhelming majority is being done by women. So you have to address those particular issues, and that's whether it's a national housing program or a national childcare program. Those kinds of things are going to make all the difference in the world, as well as the proactive hiring, the affirmative action programs. Electoral reform. There's these fundamental structures that need to happen, both in the modeling that the City of Vancouver is proposing, but also in various levels of government. I think 70% of small businesses are led by women and create the majority of jobs in Canada. So how do we make that the support possible for those women?
Okay, and I guess my second question is, part of what was done is removing women's from the name. And I'm wondering, for the gender variant component of what we're trying to be inclusive, are you seeing that as a trend on other organizations to be more inclusive to the full gender?
Yes, unfortunately, what I'm seeing with the use of the term transgender variant or queer or gay is you don't see the intersectionalities. So an obvious example, two gay men living together earn 60% more than two lesbians living together. And the lesbians are probably also raising kids and taking care of the elderly. So you have to, I think, name Maya Angelou said, when even the rainbow isn't enough because black is not in the rainbow. So you need to actually show the wide diversity of people and how gender or race or culture or indigeneity create different situations. In the Indigenous community, being two-spirited was revered. It's only recently, with the advent of Christian colonialists, that stopped being quite so revered within Indigenous communities. So that's we really need to spell out with the intersectional lens how various policies impact different people differently, whether it's in business or in transit or in housing or in violence against women.
Thanks. I'm going to have to stop that there. That was a bit of a long sentence at the end, but very interesting, and thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot, Ms. Woodsworth. Once I do something for one councillor, I have to allow that for everyone, but also wanting to give staff their own time. Councillor Carr, were you finished with your questions to staff? Well, because you used part of your time, can we agree to 2 minutes? It was okay. And then everybody else gets 5. That's the way we'll go. So if you put yourself on the queue, we'll start with 2 minutes, and then anyone else who has questions for staff, please go ahead.
Great. Thanks so much. Appreciate that, Madam Chair. So I have a question around one of the actions in the appendix. I think it's B, that talks about. I think it's. Anyway, it is in Appendix B, increasing women's sense of safety by 10%. Like, how are we going to measure that?
We have Mary Claire Zach, Managing Director, Social Policy. Thank you for the question. We actually have a partnership, an ongoing partnership with Vancouver Coastal Health as part of their My Health, My Community survey. And this is, I guess it's a bit of a mini census for Vancouver, only the focus on it is people's perceptions of their well-being. And one of the questions that we have been asking as this survey has been conducted every few years is that question around women's sense of safety. So the next one will be issued, My Health, My Community, in 2019 in the fall, and we'll get those results in the spring.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That'd be very interesting. And my second question is really in follow-up to a point that was made by our speaker, well, she wasn't really a speaker, but Ms. Woodworth, regarding pursuing the potential in the effort to engage more women. I mean, we've been trying to do that with our own advisory committees, but engaging more women to get involved in sort of the political decision-making process. Have you at all considered something like the kind of workshops that would reach out to young women in particular, but women in general, in terms of increasing their comfort level about moving forward to volunteer, to engage, to run for office, et cetera?
We haven't done that specifically. We have done in the past things around, we used to call it youth politic, and that was, multi-gendered for young people. But this is something that I think we're going to take away and with Ellen's advice and put some consideration to going forward.
That's great.
Right.
Thank you.
The one thing I wanted to add around the...
That's more than 2 minutes.
Okay.
Just... I'll let you at it because you stood up, but if we can be very, very quick in our very short conclusion,
very quick.
I'm sorry.
I just want to say about the 10%, because this is a measure coming out of the Healthy City Strategy and part of a target. With the UN scoping study, we may want to reevaluate and assess that. That'll give us a deeper sense, I think, of how women are feeling in the city.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zach. There we go. Councillor Swanson, up to 5 minutes for you for questions to staff.
Yes, thank you. I was going to ask about the sense of safety too. Is there a way of actually measuring safety rather than the sense of safety? Seems like that would be easier. Like, did you get attacked or did you fall down the stairs?
We can measure incidents of safety. through different reports and different forms of data, but often these don't capture the actual real experiences that women have or that women face. So it's often better to just ask people about their sense of safety and also why, right? And ask them, about those incidents for sure. But in terms of actual hard data, we are limited by actual reports around sexual violence when in fact things may have occurred, but people have a fear of reporting. Yes.
Okay, two more questions. One is the city supporting the Feminists Deliver Conference? And the other one is, I hear that engineering is really good at promoting women and intersectionality, and I'm wondering if there's things that are happening in engineering that could happen in other departments.
I'll respond to the first question and ask Cheryl Nelms to respond to the second. As far as Feminists Deliver goes, it's a phenomenal coalition that's been pulled together, very organic, grassroots, about 30 organizations plus, and the city has been participating in the meetings and such for the last several months. We've been a support in linking into the Women Deliver Conference, for example, the Culture Night. And we're also going to be helping to support child minding at the actual Women Deliver Conference so that women are better able to participate.
Okay, thank you.
The good news is they managed to get funding through both levels of senior government. We're very pleased about that.
Thanks. And responding to your question about what can we do in engineering and how can we share that with other departments, we have an action plan that we're actually launching tomorrow within our department. And that is a piece that has actions for both internal and rising up diversity and intersectionality within our own department, and not just focusing on just women, but diversity and intersectionality in terms of actions for our workforce, but also for the work that we do. And so, we've been doing this in total partnership, with Anne's leadership, participation from HR, recruitment, and to be able to develop these action plans, and that's what we're planning to share. But in terms of specific actions for safety, we've been focusing on that with our transportation group and looking at what can we do specifically from a design perspective to take that lens, like a gender lens, and look at how we do our designs.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Everybody gets on their flights on time. Councillor Kirby-Young, questions to staff.
Thank you. Thank you for the report, and I also want to acknowledge the work that as former Park Board Commissioner, that the Park Board has done, particularly on the transgender and variant inclusion. I think they really did lead a lot of those initiatives and sort of initiated them, and then before the city adopted them more broadly. So I want to give a shout out to that team. They did some great work. I've got a couple of questions, some bigger and some smaller. The first one I want to start with is more around the concept of racial and cultural equity. And I realize that this particular report focuses on women's equity in the TGV to us. But there is reference in the report to the Canadian Coalition of Municipalities Against Racism and Discrimination when Vancouver joined in 2010, and some very oblique references. But I'm not seeing a lot of overt kind of strategies in this particular one. So I'd like to just get a high-level understanding of if we have a particular racial and cultural equity strategy or how that ties in to some of this work.
Staff are creating actually an equity framework, and we'll be coming forward to council to tell you more about that. And we're at the very initial stages around what that would look like. So the Healthy City Strategy is, inherently is an equity-based framework, but we recognize that we need something more for our staff to really operationalize equity in our day-to-day work and day-to-day decision-making. And certainly, racial equity is going to be a key piece of that. What we've learned is the advice that we've been given is to really actually start with racial equity first and take an intersectional lens to that process. So we'll be coming back to you with more on that.
Okay, so just to reflect back then, so it's fair to say that that would have a very significant focus, because I think, the commentary was made earlier about, I think it was Councillor Woodsworth mentioned, and I'm acutely aware of it, that more than half of Vancouver are a visible minority. That's an odd term when it's not really a minority anymore, but we have such cultural diversity and rich backgrounds.
Exactly.
So it just strikes me as such something that we're really not dialing up yet, and I realize that these things are progressive. We spend time and effort, we move forward in certain areas, and then we try to sort of catch up in others. Okay, so I'm glad to hear that. The other thing I wanted to ask, and it was probably in response to an update from Ms. Nelms, was the focus on women in sport, et cetera, was a focus on women in business, because economy and having incomes and pay equity is so fundamental to raising people up and having that sort of the same equity, not just in sort of other aspects of their life, but in the business world. And this is something I think even in around our themes, the Women Deliver Conference, we have women in sport and we've got other things we're celebrating, but I'm seeing a void in women in business. Can you comment on that?
I think it's a fair observation that you've made that we haven't, from an economic development perspective, we haven't done a lot of work around women in business in particular. We've certainly done work in local community economic development and at the kind of low barrier employment opportunities around in that area, and the recent city social procurement strategy calls for significant moves in the deployment, in kind of the allocation of city procurement to support equity-seeking groups, including women equity-seeking business owners. But I think your observation is fair. We haven't done a significant amount of work in that area.
Okay, and I'm going to move on to a couple other questions. Thanks for helping me move through these quickly. The other one is around, what's the City of Vancouver's sort of policy and status around pay equity from a gender perspective?
Good morning. Andrew Niklicki, Human Resources. The City of Vancouver has been doing a lot of work with a variety of our unions over the years in terms of these sensitive, thoughtful conversations. And most of those conversations have occurred at the bargaining table as a result of wage rates as they relate to classifications and the type of work that's been done.
And what about for exempt staff that are not necessarily our unionized workforce?
Our pay policy basically is we pay for the work that you perform, and we're guided by, for example, the Human Rights Code, which sets out a prohibition against discriminating against paying people in those classifications differently based on the fact of whether you're a man or a woman.
Okay, and do we know in practice how we're doing? Because I know that we're guided by the legislation. Have we done an audit, or do we have a sense of where we sit?
Currently, as we're preparing for collective bargaining, we're gathering all that information.
Okay, I will look forward to receiving that. I think that would be really helpful. And I'm going to run out of time, so I'll probably have to wait for another round. I've got one more. Thanks.
Thank you very much for staying close to your time there. Councillor Kirby-Yung, right on time. Councillor Weep, questions of staff.
Yeah, just looking. First of all, it's a great report, and it's good to see this work being done. 5.4 talks about the organizing a two-spirited event. And this was an amazing event that I was able to attend, and Paul Cezanne, his work behind the scenes and the team from Park Board were amazing on it. But when it says organizing and that this is now complete, these are the type of events that I really want to see ongoing, and I think sometimes when we do these strategies, we do a check mark, we did it, but I really would like to see and know how we're going to progress and continue this work forward. So I'm just wondering, when it says complete, does that complete every year we're going to be doing this, or what are we looking at as a long-term strategy?
It is ongoing. It was complete in 2019, but I'm going to ask Paul Zena from Park Board to respond to that.
Well, thank you, Councillor Weep, for the question. What has happened is at the event, 60 individuals voluntarily provided their contact information. The event was done jointly with the LGBTQ2+ Advisory Committee. So we've been on hold until the committees reform, and we have our first meeting June 13th. And at that time, we're going to be working on how to move forward with the new regular part-time position who will be taking the lead on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Second question would be on encouraging senior staff. I guess it's on 3.1 and a few of the other kind of action items. It talks about preferred pronouns and email signatures and just these little acts that we can do. However, I haven't seen a lot on a lot of signatures I get at City, except for the ones I've received from Park Board over the last week, which really kind of shocked me when I saw them. And City councilors haven't had the ability to add them to our signatures as well. And I think that the amount of emails our council does, so I'm wondering, is there an ability for us to be included in more of the work moving forward on inclusion?
Certainly some of those important signals are very important symbols, and I do have my pronouns on my email, as do many of the team members. You maybe just haven't received emails from those particular folks, but certainly we can send some kind of signature information to council, mayor, council, so that you can consider adding that.
Okay. And a follow-up, another question I had before to Ellen was on what are we doing to ensure that we can provide information to small business communities to move their websites or their information or just their access to be more inclusionary? Because I know there's some that come in within wanting the Indigenous lens on how they do an acknowledgement or how they remove pronouns from their websites, or just that idea of really creating an inclusive city for everyone is how do we work with those communities that want to, just are nervous to enter that field?
We don't have any specific initiatives related to that quite yet. However, as we frame out and complete the work on the equity framework and the intersectional toolkit, some of these pieces will flow from that, I anticipate, including things like targets, things like that. But when those are done, those are certainly tools that we would be pleased to share with other organizations, including local businesses. It's something that we could proactively work through our BIA network, as well as through our membership in the Board of Trade. So we can certainly look at that.
Thank you. And last one would be, at Park Board, we had an amazing strategy, and we found that the implementation needed some extra resources, and we hired people from the community to help deliver that. I'm wondering, at the city, looking at the amount of work in this strategy, are we hiring people from this community to be involved at cities to really push the implementation side of this?
What I would say is that the city has had a very long-standing commitment and policy that we want a workforce, and we want to hire a workforce that is representative of the community we serve. And that certainly includes all genders. We do now, through our application process, ask people to voluntarily disclose certain information and indicate in the introductory to that we're seeking members from a very diverse group, including those from trans, gender variant, and two-spirit communities. So we certainly do seek that. We have not, within the city as of yet, had any designated positions such as Park Board. They had 2 temporary positions previously and now 1 permanent. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you. Yeah.
Councillor Wiebe, Councillor Boyle, questions to staff.
Yes, I also just want to echo a big thanks for all of this work. Most of my questions were asked, but I'm curious if you have a sense of timeline when we might hear back more on the equity framework and the intersectional toolkit that I know you're working hard on.
Thank you. We are planning to bring a council briefing, a series of briefings to council over the next few months, and our plan is we're hoping to have these pieces completed and ready for council approval by early next year.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Kirby-Young, is that a holdover? Okay. Thanks. Oh, I haven't changed queues, so. Okay, I didn't change cues for Ms. Woodsworth. I cleared it. So I'll just advance. Actually, I'll advance Councillor Dominato on first. Councillor Dominato, questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair, sorry, and thank you to staff for it's a very comprehensive report. There's obviously a lot taking place. I just wanted to follow up on previously there was a motion brought forward to Council around equitable benefits for top-up supplemental benefits for adoptive parents, for parental leave, for fathers who may want to take leave for their children, newborn babies. I'm just wondering if you could comment on that in the context of this strategy and where we're at and what that looks like today. In terms of that, I know it exists provincially. So I'm just wondering.
Yep, maybe I could, through the chair, if I might jump in on that one. And I just sent you an email to council on that, sensing that this was coming forward. We did have a motion on that in 2017, as you've referred to, and we had very extensive conversations with council. And I would recommend that if council's interested in discussing this, that we have a further detailed briefing in camera, given just the HR implications of this topic. As I said, we spent many hours discussing it and trying to achieve what was outlined in that motion. So that would be my recommended next step on that.
Okay, and with that, so that would have to take place in camera, just to be clear?
Yes, that's correct.
Because of the HR component?
That's correct, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dominato. And I have some questions myself. Thank you. Hang on, start my own timer here. I want to thank staff very much for this presentation. Also understanding that as the liaison to the Women's Advisory Committee this time around, I'm very excited about that. I've enjoyed being on all of the committees, and I really do feel that there is an intersectional lens and cross-collaboration around committees. And at all of the ones that I've been on, there has been discussion about gender and how to be more inclusive. So what are we doing at our own City Hall? And one of the questions that I get asked a lot is, what are we doing for resources, not just here, in our city, like at our City Hall, but also for others in the community? Is there, do we often get a lot of inquiries through 311 about childcare services? What are we doing to help make sure that we're connecting women with the services they need? Childcare was just one example of that. But as a city councillor, I'm almost quite usually contacted by women who are looking for these services in desperation. I know that it's not a city responsibility, but in our women's equity strategy and considering the resources we offer, especially through our community services, just wondering if you might be able to elaborate on what resources we're giving to connect people in the community.
I think one of the best tools that we have to connect people in community are actually the grants that council approves to women serving and women-led organizations across Vancouver, whether it's around support for situations of violence, whether it's child minding or child care services and how they can access those. So there are a myriad of supports that we fund on a regular basis.
Thank you very much. And then a follow-up on childcare, just because it's been something that I've certainly been very, very much aware of and looking at through the lens of how do we make sure that we are able to, moving forward with building housing, build those extra services, including childcare. I just recently heard from a mom who lives in Vancouver, works in Burnaby, and takes her kid to childcare in Richmond. So I'm wondering, what are we doing, not just for traditional childcare, but childcare outside of those hours, or to assist people whose childcare doesn't match up with their children's schools? I know we're trying to co-locate those, but what are we doing to make sure that that's open and an option for people as we move forward with our city policies?
We're looking at those under consideration, and in fact, there are there is some thinking around like what do other models look like that could perhaps be connected to a regular childcare that's Monday through Friday, but we're not quite there yet. But we do certainly recognize that it's an issue for many parents who require care outside of those regular Monday to Friday hours.
Thank you. And another question for staff would be, and I've had this conversation with Ms. Woodsworth, women who want to come and speak to us have also contacted me. I'm not saying that there aren't men out there, asking if we offer child minding services for while they're here. Just a short drop-in brief amount of time. I know that there's issues with that, liability, all sorts of things. When I've asked about that, is there any possibility, is that something staff is considering or in the future on a paid or unpaid basis for people coming to want to participate from the public in our meetings?
Yeah, it's something that we should be considering, and we would need to scope it and get back to you.
Okay.
Certainly possible.
Thank you very much. All right, and that's all of the questions that I see here. And we were, okay. Let me just go back to my script right now, and actually let me just check with what I thought. I didn't see anyone jumping to, oh, there we go. Thank you, Councillor Carr. Thought everyone would be coming on the queue at once here. But Councillor Carr.
Yes, I'd like to move the recommendations in the report, and I believe that I've seen circulation of some amendments. I'll leave it there and let people put forward the amendments, but I just really, again, want to appreciate staff for the work on this and for continuing to really move along all of the council and all of the staff in terms of both of the strategies that you've highlighted today. It's a lot of work. I very much appreciate the leads in each department that are moving forward with this, so thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. I'm just going to move us over Councillor Swanson now that we have a motion on the floor. Councillor Swanson, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to make an amendment.
Oh, just a moment. There we go. Councillor Swanson.
But the one I had two parts, so just take the second part off.
Okay. So you'd like to remove the second part?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'll move us to Amendment Q.
Gendered intersectional strategy with goals.
Oh, her mic's on. Just move a little closer, maybe? Thanks.
And that are measurable and supported for at least 6 years.
Okay, and that's the first part of this?
That's the whole part of it.
Okay. Just a moment. Thank you very much, Councillor Swanson. Okay, and we're in committee, so we don't need a seconder. Does anyone want to speak to this? No? Seeing. Okay, all right, wow. All right, I will move us to a voting queue before anyone gets on the queue. And please vote on screen. Mayor Stewart. Your vote's not been recorded, Councillor Dominato. I need you to also vote. Councillor Dominato and Mayor Stewart, I'm just waiting for you to vote on screen. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Council, maybe what I'll do is, because I should have offered you time to read this. I thought it was sent out in advance. I still should have offered you time to read it. I can move us back to the queue if you'd like. Is there anyone who'd like to go on the queue? Please put yourself on. Oh, we're in the middle of voting. Okay, I'm sorry. So you just have to vote. Next time, let me know. Put your hand up if you need a minute to read it. Councillor Wiebe, you're not voted. Do you want to recess, Councillor Wiebe? Oh, well, we can't. Sorry, we're in the middle of voting. Okay. And so the votes are in, and the amendment passes with Councillor Wiebe in opposition. Okay, and I will move us back to... Okay. I'm moving us back to the queue. Councillor Swanson, anything further? Okay. All right. So we were on... Okay. Just a moment. Move us back to the main queue. Is there anyone else on the queue to speak to this at all? We're in the main queue, Council, with the motion as amended. Okay. All right. Well, I'll speak to the motion. Oh, as chair, I usually speak afterwards. Or I could speak to the motion if Councillor Dominato or... Are you? Okay. So I will speak to the motion then. I will advance myself on the queue, and I will put Councillor Dominato back on here. All right, start my own timer. I just really wanted to take this opportunity to thank staff. I know that you collaborate and work closely with so many organizations and groups in the community, including Ms. Woodsworth, who I want to also thank for being here on behalf of Women Transforming Cities. It's something that's very near and dear to my heart. To see the city move forward with a women's equity strategy. As someone who started off at a very young age in politics and being interested in civic government, when most others were interested in those other levels, such as federal government or international relations, it was because of people who were very generous with their time. And it was because there were programs in place like the Canadian Women's Voters Congress, and that there were policies. And I think that now we see our city of Vancouver as a leader in that, and that's because of our staff and all of the great work that you do, not just on the women's equity strategy, but every day in our organization to implement that. And it's certainly something that I hear. I had the opportunity to attend the presentation from staff here that came from FCM to talk to us about women, gender equity, and I think that it's very important. Councillor Fry also was there. I think that it's very important that we do put this lens on everything we do. And I've heard from women who feel that either it's not possible for them to do this, that it's harder for women. And I think that we all together need to be a part of making sure that that's not something that they feel. Also, to Councillor Wiebe's comments, it's not just about women. It's about all people, and regardless of gender or how they identify, I think that it's important that we make room for everyone here in our city. So I feel that having that lens also on this policy and seeing that collaboration amongst across the whole organization, it's something that I feel very proud of. I came back to work 10 days after having my daughter, and had her just in my office here, and would often step out of council and watch it in my office as I nursed her, and felt very supported by all of our staff and many councillors who were on council at the time. And I think that it's important, although it's not easy. I'm not going to tell you that it was easy. I think that we need to move forward to make sure that all people are able to have a place here, regardless of their gender, and that includes men as well. I don't think that we should exclude men from that. So I just wanted to wholeheartedly thank our staff for the work that you do, not just during Women's Deliver, which is absolutely amazing, and I can't tell you how excited I am for this mock council experience and to be paired with a mentee, but I also know that this isn't something we're just doing for Women Deliver. It's something that we've made a commitment to every day, and I know that if we ever lose sight of that, Ms. Woodsworth, former councillor herself, will definitely let us know, but in a good way, though. I think that it's important that we get feedback from the community. So I understand that we have other things on the agenda to get through today, and I can't go through each and every piece. How I feel that you're working with Indigenous people also who may identify as trans or as women who want to get involved in politics or just to make sure that there's equality in our city. So thank you. Councillor Dominato, to the motion as amended by Councillor Swanson.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I've just submitted 2 amendments I'd like to propose to the report. The first being the addition of the Vancouver Board of Education to B, and that is because having served on school board, there's an enormous amount of work happening with respect to inclusion and recognizing the importance of having safe, inclusive, welcoming schools. And I actually think that when we're different level of government, and we've got Park Board in there and others, but in the Library Board, but I do think that sharing the work that we're doing here, there's lots of overlap. And so that's what drove that. I think that they should be included. And I think we should be putting that lens on everything we do where there's some overlap, and there is quite a bit in the work we do. And then the second is further to my question around equitable parental leave at the City of Vancouver. So there was a motion, as the City Manager noted, in 2017, and that I understand that there was a number, quite some discussions by Council around that. So I've proposed that there be a briefing provided to Council to look at that and explore how we might achieve the goal of equitable parental leave for beyond birth mothers. So
I'll move us to Amendment Q. Okay. Councillor Fry, you are on the queue.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'm happy to support this motion. I think it's thoughtfully put together, and I appreciate that it really takes that context from the work that's been done with the previous council and gives an opportunity for this new council, in particular on item D, to really explore some of those and put our own mark on it as a new council and see how we can make that happen. So, and I think it's important to share this kind of direction and collaborate with our other civic agencies. So I'm supportive of both amendments.
Thanks, Councillor Fry. I'll just advance myself on the queue to say I'm supportive of both. And although in 2017, I thought out of an abundance of caution, I should conflict out because my daughter was just a few months old at the time. I have checked with legal, and I am no longer in a conflict. I understand this came up at the last council again, and enough time has passed that this wouldn't benefit me, myself, or my family. So I will be wholeheartedly supporting this, and I think that it's important that we send a message to all parents that they're treated equally in parental leave, and that we treat that in the way that Councillor Dominato very eloquently described. I remember Councillor Ball bringing forward a motion with examples that when I could participate in the discussion, I was amazed at the amount of examples that were brought forward. So happy to see this and echo Councillor Fry's comments. I think that it's time that we look at the most progressive policies that we can. Also, adding the Vancouver Board of Education, I think is very thoughtful. So happy to support that. And seeing no one else on the queue, I'll call a vote on this amendment. Or can we vote together, Council, on these amendments? Or okay, thank you. I don't see any reason to sever. Mayor Stewart. Oh, reading. Sorry. Okay, and that passes unanimously. Thank you. Back to the main motion, back to the motion as amended by first Councillor Swanson, then Councillor Dominato. Just a moment here. I guess back to the main queue. Councillor Kirby-Yung.
Thank you. Speaking to the main motion, I appreciate the update and the work from staff, and I've already acknowledged the work from the Park Board, especially particularly on the transgender and variant two-spirit inclusion, and I'm really hopeful that we continue. I guess spirit is a good word for that. I think that spirit has certainly permeated, whether it's in kind of attitudes programs, into physical manifestations in terms of universal washrooms, et cetera. I am really hopeful, and I appreciated kind of the acknowledgement from staff that we do have a huge opportunity and a need in terms of really pushing forward on racial and cultural equity. And since we are now, the resident advisory committees have been restruck, we now have one, the Racial and Cultural Equity Advisory Committee, which I'm very pleased to be the liaison to. I think that that's going to be a really good forum to be able to have a lot of those conversations. And I think that's another area that Vancouver can excel in, but not just because we want to move the needle forward, but because we have a lot of significant issues with intolerance, and we're seeing that increasingly in a number of our communities, whether it's hate crime in the Jewish communities or just a genuine unwelcomeness as people are experiencing affordability challenges and struggles. It manifests itself in very challenging ways. So that's an area of real focus, and I appreciate kind of staff's acknowledgement of that. And then particularly on the economic development piece as well, as it relates to women. I think that's so fundamental because unless you can materially change people's circumstances and lift them up, that's such a trigger for everything else. The other comment that I would make, other than being very proud of the fact that we have an 80% female council, I'd probably make two other quick comments, is that this might sound a bit funny, but there is life beyond politics, and I know that we're a political body, we tend to think a lot about that, but I think a lot of the purpose of these strategies is really the broader community and the broader residents of the city of Vancouver, and so certainly Vancouver can lead by example in terms of policies, and it's great to sort of see we've got such a strong female council, as Mayor Stewart acknowledged, and others. But it's really about women in all of the other aspects of business and community and nonprofit and volunteers and all the leadership that they show. And so I think that's ultimately what we have to really think about is how are what we're doing here really going to kind of move the needle forward for them. And then my final comment, and I didn't have a chance to raise it in questions, but it was just an observation, is that I know that the city of Vancouver, I believe, was one of the first to fly the trans flag in conjunction with the pride flag for the Pride Proclamation a couple of years ago. And it was in the news recently that Surrey had indicated that they would not be doing that during Pride upcoming, which I thought was very unfortunate. And Surrey cited their flag policy restricting them from being able to do that. And I know that Vancouver has led on it, so it's just a plug that I'm hopeful that we are going to continue to do that, and for upcoming Pride celebrations and Pride Proclamation at the appropriate time, that we fly both the trans and the Pride flags at Vancouver City Hall again, because while it might seem to be one gesture, symbolism is really important. So other than that, thank you very much for your work on the report, and I'm looking forward to the next steps.
Thank you, Councillor Kirby-Young. Just before I advance Councillor Swanson, we're in a bit of an unusual schedule today, Council, so anyone who was thinking that we were going to have a lunch from 12 to 1 when we're breaking at 1 so that most of you can get to FCM, that is not going to happen. I just wanted to make sure you knew that. And sorry to interrupt the conversation, the dialogue. I just thought I should let everyone know because we are nearing 12:30. Councillor Swanson, to the motion as amended.
Yeah.
Or 11:30, sorry. Yes.
I just wanted to say three things. I was really glad to find out about the Feminist Deliver conference because I was concerned that the other conference was inaccessible because of the cost, even though there are a few subsidies for it. So that's good. I do want to thank staff for working so hard on this and thank Ellen for giving me all kinds of advice and Ann Roberts. And I want to acknowledge, too, that we have a lot of work to do, especially on the intersectionality part. And I hope we can progress on that. And thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Councillor Swanson. Councillor Wiebe, to the motion as amended.
Yeah, I'd also like to thank staff for the amazing work that's happened over the last number of years and the continued push. And I know sometimes this conversation can be difficult and sometimes actually delivering the work and the implementation can be the hardest part because it's not one voice you're hearing multiple voices all the time pulling you in different directions because everyone is learning in this field. And I think that's what's so amazing about the staff is you've been able to challenge and make mistakes and recognize those and go back to the drawing board and try again. And I think that's something we'll have to continue to do with this is not just put out strategies and goals and right, but the actual implementation and talking to the people that really are affected by this. And I think that's what's so amazing is that we've come up with ways to really do it. And I would love to continue to see us push and continue to make mistakes and continue to learn from the people we learn from. And there's so much staff that have done amazing work on this field. So continue that work. Council is supportive. We really want to see it continue. So thank you so much and let us know what we can do. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Mayor Stewart, to the motion as amended.
Great. Yeah, I'd just like to just continue the compliments. Thank former Councillor Woodsworth and all the staff for the great work. In a world where everything seems to be going in the other direction, we seem to be going the right way, and I just wanted to commend Council for that. This is a signal that we can send not just across the country but around the world, and I am will proudly speak of this work as we kind of take the message across, out to other places. So again, thanks for all this work. I look forward to seeing what happens next week. I know everybody's really, really, really excited I get messages all the time on it. So thanks for all the work staff have put into this, and really proud of what we've accomplished here today. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mayor Stewart. Councillor Carr.
Yes, as the mover of the motion, I'll just give my final comments. I think that staff, you've seen in the votes on the amendments, particularly Councillor Swanson's one, which was really giving direction on some clear and continued and focused work across all departments and on the strategy that has been developed. That that there's real sense of this council being behind this. This work that you're doing. I also just want to affirm for all of us that the work that I'm doing in Women for Climate, it's very remarkable in terms of women's leadership. It is in many countries around the world, women who are coming to the fore. Potentially, I think, or probably because they are so hard hit and families are so hard hit by the climate crisis that they are really stepping forward. But their leadership is very clear there, and so I think that this meshes with the work that we're doing at the city level. I'm very proud of that work.
Thanks, Councillor Carr. And seeing no one else on the queue, we will vote on the amended motion. Yes, the motion is amended. Councillor Boyle and Councillor Dominato. Great, wonderful. So we have unanimous support for that, and I'd like to thank staff for all of their work on this report, but also for all of your work, and congratulate you and wish you luck with Women Deliver and the satellite sessions and Feminists Deliver. I think it's wonderful to have this celebration, and hopefully this vote of council affirms what we're doing here in the city. Thanks. All right, Council, I'm going to try and get us through rather quickly now. That was a report that I had a feeling might take quite some time. There were lots of questions and there was lots to be said. But now we are on to item 2, which is theater rental grant allocations, fall 2019 and spring 2020. Staff from Arts, Culture, and Community Services are here to answer any questions from Council. That being said, Council, please remember we have 3 speakers also on the list. Do I have anyone on the queue for questions of staff? Nope. Okay, so I will advance us then to speakers. Speakers have up to 3 minutes to address Council. And our first speaker is Nina Horvath, Executive Director of the Vancouver Bach Choir.
Good morning.
I'll give you one moment just until there are some people that are coming and going, and just wait till the doors close there and
when you're good.
Give you a chance to be heard there. All right, Ms. Horvath.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor and Councillors, for allowing me to speak this morning. As you already said, my name is Nina Horvath. I'm the Executive Director for the Vancouver Bach Choirs. We are one of the oldest performing arts groups in Vancouver. We're nearing our 90th year in operation, and today we consist of 8 choirs, and we provide training and performance opportunities to all ages. Each year we present between 3 and 4 shows in civic theater venues. For us, the Orpheum has been our unofficial home since our first concert in 1930, and we rely, I'll refer to it as the TRG, the Theater Rental Grant, to help us continue this legacy. This grant is one of our largest financial supports each year, and it represents up to 10% of total revenue sources in a given season. It is equally as significant to other organizations we collaborate with, such as the Vancouver Academy of Music, Vancouver Opera, West Coast Symphony, or the VSO, to name a few. The nature of what we do necessitates a large theater and stage, since a typical concert for us has anywhere between 100 to 400 performers on stage, and there are not many venues in Vancouver that can support that. Thanks to the TRG, we have come to rely on access to these premier performance venues in Vancouver and the support of talented staff and crew that make our productions safe and successful. Our audiences have repeatedly told us how special it is to be able to attend concerts in venues such as the Orpheum and the value that this adds. It also creates a truly special experience for our members, particularly our children's choir singers, and this helps to create lifelong supporters of the arts. I don't think for us it's an exaggeration to say that access to funding like the TRG has helped to define us and what we're able to do as an organization. However, of course, it's not all roses. As I started thinking about this, all I could think about was that working in nonprofit these days feels more and more like being in that trash compactor in Star Wars. You're trying your best, but the walls just keep narrowing and challenges become greater and greater. Expenses rise and funding sources don't rise at the same rate. The last time the TRG received a significant increase in funds was in 2010. At that point, the total funds dispersed were $2.7 million between 19 organizations. Today, we are discussing dispersing $2.7 million between 44 organizations. So yes, let's celebrate the increased depth and diversity in culture and performing arts that this represents, but not overlook the challenges that this creates. I think we can all agree that arts and culture are part of what defines our city, and I thank you for prioritizing this. However, I hope that this shows you that there are ongoing challenges as well, and that I can encourage you to present a continued commitment and investment into the TRG, as it is crucial to success for organizations like ours.
Thank you very much. And there aren't any questions for you. Appreciate your presentation. And our next speaker that signed up is Ray, is it Zhao? Am I saying that correctly? Okay, Mr. Zhao, music director and conductor, Vancouver Youth Philharmonic Orchestra. You have up to 3 minutes to speak to council. They're just moving it up and down. And the timer's just there to your right. I'll start your timer now.
Okay. So we have BC Philharmonic Society has a two orchestra. That is a very young orchestra with 3 years. We are a non-profit organization. The BC Philharmonic Society would like to know the comments by the Vancouver City Theatre Rental Jury in response to our recent application. The application for funding was not accepted. My organization had a strong and relative quick growth and is now looking for community support. So far, we have not been able to secure any public funding. This despite enthusiastic membership and artistic accomplishment. The BC Philharmonic Society is unique in its programming and regularly combines professional performance with higher level student participation under professional guidance. Our quick question is this a barrier to public funding? If so, then please consider our successful results. The BC Philharmonic Society requests a meeting with the City Culture Programs officers to discuss our organization and perhaps find a funding program that fits the organization. The main activities of the BC Philharmonic Society are conducted with the City of Vancouver. Our weekly rehearsal is at the Scottish Culture Centre, and our main 2 concerts last year was in the Norman Roasting Theatre, which had the capacity attend about 300. We performed concert in the UBC Chan Center, which had a capacity attendance of 1,000 last December. This public support was the reason we applied to the Vancouver Theatre Rental Grant to find a large, suitable venue for our upcoming events in December 22, 2019. Please consider support our organization and assisting in our growth and development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any questions for you. So I'll move on to our third and final speaker on this item, Council, Daniel Zindler, Artistic Director, Vancouver Cabaret Circus, Sophisticated Laughter Theatrical Society. Mr. Zindler here? No? Okay. Does Council have questions to staff at all? No? All right. Could I have a motion? Oh, thank you very much. Saw Councillor Bly first, so we don't need a seconder. I don't see anyone on the queue to speak. All right, so we can go straight to the vote on this. Please vote on screen, Council. All right, and that passes unanimously in favor. Thanks very much. All right, and then we are, that is, just one moment, Council. Know that we passed that, so that has passed. Now we have item 4, which was held by Councillor Carr, which is the contract award for the consultant for Arbutus Greenway, character zones 3 and 8. Staff from supply chain are here to answer any questions of Council. So, Councillor Carr, you held this report, and I see staff have arrived in chambers, so I'll start your time now.
Great. Thanks so much. I am interested in a couple of things about this report. Number one, why these two particular zones? Why are we starting in these areas? Yeah, that's my first question. And my second is, a lot of people have been saying this is a lot of money just for 2 zones. I mean, so if you could respond to that at the same time, that would be great.
Just as staff get up to the microphone, I wanted to also let everyone know that we have students joining us here from the grade 7 class at Sir John Franklin Elementary School. They're up in the top area there. So just wanted to also welcome and acknowledge them here today before staff answer questions. Thanks so much. And thanks for coming.
If you could change the timer, thanks.
Good morning, Chair, Mayor, and Council. Thank you for having us here today. My name is Maggie Buttle, and I am the Senior Project Manager of the Arbutus Greenway. In reference to your first question, in regards to how did a sequencing come that Zone 3 and Zone 8 came forward first, the project team developed an implementation strategy that determines the phased construction of the Arbutus Greenway. The strategy evaluated each of the character zones against a number of criteria. And these considerations were items such as project readiness, land use planning initiatives, and the complexity of construction. Some zones were more obvious to target early construction, and those were the ones that were not impacted by future transit development and the future citywide neighbourhood planning initiatives. So these were the zones that were weighted and evaluated and came forward as the best zones to proceed as the first implementation strategy. In regards, any response?
Yes. No, that's great. I understand that now. That's super. Now, what about the costs?
In terms of the cost for this design contract, which is $2.5 million, the value of a contract award of something of this size is typical for a project of this scope and complexity. This design will look into a more refined level of detail and resolve a lot of complex issues such as retaining walls, green infrastructure, and a number of architectural drawings for the washrooms. This design also includes resolving a number of really big design decisions that will relate to all zones across the Greenway, not just Zone 3 and Zone 8. This design could be a template for the entire corridor for elements such as the suite of furniture, wayfinding, and lighting for the rest of the Greenway. And finally, this contract value also includes construction administration costs as well. So should Council approve the construction of these zones, there is construction administration costs for this consultant to review due to field reviews and the construction services related.
Okay, I may have follow-up on that, but before I get there, I'm wondering if an enhanced public participation and potentially even co-creation is included in these costs.
Absolutely. So as part of this design contract, we will be doing further public engagement towards the end of this year. And that is working very closely with the directly affected residents, working with our cross-city staff, and working with the public and a number of stakeholders on these detailed design zones of 3 and 8.
Okay. I know that in the first part of the Arbutus corridor, that there was some public reaction, and we kind of went back and did a more enhanced, and I would actually call it co-creation with the residents, which ended up being or resulting in very supportive local communities along the route. So again, is that really the intent of this kind of public participation or public engagement?
There'll be a number of different approaches in our public engagement. There'll be open houses where the public can come in and get involved and see our designs. And where it kind of gets to co-creation is working really with those directly affected adjacent residents, having smaller meetings with those residents, and similarly with the community gardens in terms of how we arrange plots for community gardens and how people would like it to look like. So on a smaller level, not so much as on a broader level. Okay. That was in a previous engagement.
And you raised actually my a point around my last question, which really is thank you, which really is around the local gardens. I mean, those were something that I think people were very upset about earlier, and the tearing down of the blackberries, which they love to pick. So we are including some gardening opportunities?
Absolutely. In Zone 8, we recognise that there is a lack of community gardens down in Marpole. So we have identified community gardens as part of that zone, putting them in a location where there's great solar energy, and working with the community there in terms of what they can look like and how they can be arranged in that zone.
Thank you. Appreciate your answers.
Councillor Hardwick, up to 5 minutes, questions to staff.
Thank you. You indicated that these two sections were chosen because there were not transit implications included them. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Sure. We're relating it to future transit implications such as the Broadway subway extension, because that is located in Zone 2. So that was one of the considerations of why Zone 2 wouldn't proceed as the first phase, because there could be so much implications with that Broadway subway coming and what it could look like and the development that could come around that it would be best for the project to wait, see what that materializes, and then come forward with detailed design later at that time.
Mm-hmm. And the other one?
In terms of, sorry, could I?
Why that you said there were not, there were two zones, and one was that they both had no transit implications. You've described one, but not the other.
So Zone 2 has the transit-related implications, but Zone 3 doesn't. This is between 16th and King Ed. There's no major transit-related implications there, as well as Zone 8, which is South West Marine to Milton Street. That has no major transit-related items in that zone.
Except, of course, keeping in mind that the Supreme Court did rule that the corridor should continue to be used as a transportation corridor.
Absolutely. I mean, that is a key consideration for us with the Arbutus Greenway. That's why, as part of our vision, we have reserved space for the future streetcar to be reserved for the part of the corridor.
Also, I'd like to touch on the cost implications of this. I'm very concerned about affordability in the broader sense in the city. This seems to me as a discretionary project, not something that has urgent implications for the public purse. And I think that's something that we should be considering. Where is the funds, and I see Mr. Dalbravoni rising here, where are the funds for this coming from? I recognize that this is just $2.5 million, but it's $2.5 million of non-essential costs. So where's it coming from?
Sure, a couple of things. So in our capital plan, this capital plan, we had identified funding for the design, and funding for construction would need to come from external funding. We'll make a number of applications. So the funding in the capital plan is just for design. It comes from CAC funding from the Shannon Muse project. And when the Shannon Muse project went through development, it specifically identified the Arbutus Greenway as the amenity package that it was wanted to contribute towards. And the last thing I just comment on in terms of the priority or the necessity of a project like this, because this is such an all-encompassing project, it's an opportunity for us to advance many of our existing and emerging city initiatives, such as green infrastructure and improving ecology. And we're looking at migration patterns through this corridor, community gardens being added. So there's, in addition to the transportation function, because it is a transportation corridor, it's actually a rail corridor still, it allows us to also advance many other city and engineering priorities.
Thank you. I would argue that, again, these are things that are nice to have as opposed to need to have, and I'm concerned about overall affordability. I have another question. You mentioned the public process, again, building on the question that Councillor Carr had asked earlier about the public participation in this process. You said that you wanted them to get involved to see our designs. I'm curious how you can have a co-creative process when you're just asking people to comment on things that have already been determined.
Councillor Hardwick.
I'm asking a question, how people can be asked if these have already been determined. So I'd appreciate
you're asking if they have been determined. You're not saying they have.
I was. Okay. If we go back and we were to listen to the video again, we would.
You said it was already all determined, so I just wanted to
see our designs was what you said.
Thank you.
Sure, I can provide further comment on that. So we've had a long engagement process on this project, starting from the design vision, where the public became involved and identified what their vision was for this greenway. And then we had multiple engagements. So at the end of our last design, we had a conceptual design proposed to the public that everyone was involved with and contributed towards in what the greenway looks like. When I'm referring to design later this year, this detailed design team will put together a very high-level design development of what these zones could look like. Then we will work with the community in terms of how they feel about those designs. And following that, we will get into more detailed designs. So we get to a more refined detail. We'll be working for another 6 months of those designs following public engagement to ensure that we incorporate everyone's opinion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kirby-Yung, up to 5 minutes for questions to staff. You can always put yourself on and we can ask for another round, Council. I just want to remind you, although this is our last item, we still have bylaws to pass to make sure that those grants that we've passed at committee move forward, and we have a hard end time of 1 p.m. So I just wanted to mention that. Councillor Kirby-Yung, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it. I just want to ask a couple questions following up on Councillor Hardwick on the source of funds. And I know you mentioned, Mr. Dubrovny, that it was coming from capital and external funds would be needed to complete it. And I'm wondering if we have a sense of, and I realize it's a bit cart and horse, but I wonder if we have a sense of the magnitude of what type of funds would be needed, and also whether or not we think we're going to have the ability to have source of funds to do that. And I ask the question because we did seem to be in a situation coming up the Vancouver Park Board where we're developing a lot of plans but didn't have any funding to deliver. So, for example, I referenced the Northeast Falls Creek plan, the fantastic design that was done and brought in the folks from New York to design that, and some additional work with First Nations, but there's no actual funding identified to build the park. So I always want to manage the expectations of the public. It's great to have a design, but do we have an ability to fulfill? Do we know where funds might come from? Do we know how much it might cost?
The cost would be determined through the design. That's the progression is to do the design, do the cost estimating, and then we'll know what the actual cost or engineering's estimate is of the budget that's required. We've got a lot of interest that's been expressed by senior governments, regional. It serves many purposes. We've talked about blue-green corridors. There's opportunities for Metro and TransLink in terms of a regional perspective. There's interest and conversations with both the levels of senior government as well. And so, but we're not able to, for many of those programs, we're not able to submit or take part if we don't have either a shovel-ready project or at least a good understanding of the cost. So that's why in the capital plan we identified the design work so we could work with the community as long as that takes to have a project that's designed, ready to go, and we know what the cost is. And I'd say I'm fairly confident. I asked Maggie if she wanted me to speculate or if she wanted to do it. I mean, I'm fairly confident that there will be a lot of interest in this project. It is a spectacular project that achieves many, many different objectives. of both senior levels of government and regional government and city government as well.
On that note, and I'm just going to move along for time, and thank you, I appreciate it, because I'm a huge fan and proponent of public space, but it is interesting because I know that the various levels of government are prioritizing childcare, housing, et cetera, but you do feel that there's an opportunity. And if that opportunity did not exist, we would be looking potentially at a much longer delivery of the ability to build this out. Is that fair?
Yes, absolutely. The delivery for this will likely be decades. We want to get started. We want to identify the areas. By doing a design, if there's complementary work in the area, we can piggyback on that. It starts with having a design so we know what we want to do. We'll be reporting back to council on the blue-green corridors. This is a prime corridor where there's opportunity there. As I said, we look at migratory paths. There's all kinds of ecological reasons, and the transportation corridor. We've got over 3,000 pedestrians and cyclists. When we talk about the climate emergency and reporting back to council, this will be a big part of our response to that as well.
So we should potentially view this as longer term unless we are fortunate and identify other means to make it happen more quickly?
Yes, the delivery of the entire corridor will take decades.
I guess maybe zeroing in on this report for these specific,
for this
one, our FEOI for these specific.
Well, I'm hopeful that we can get interest from those other parties next year, and I think that we need to have a project that's ready to go so we can have those conversations. We've started those conversations already. We know there's interest. But they want to know how much and what exactly is it.
Okay, and then moving on, just in the last minute I have, for the detailed design vision, the 2018 Arbues Greenway design vision that was approved by council last July, I believe. And I know that there's references in the RFEI here to things like dark skies, light level controls, and others, and I know that was really important for residences and people living along the corridor. I'm just wondering if you can characterize in general in terms of the vision, because I think that's intended to deliver here, if this is awarded, around sort of principles, the use of paved versus hard surfaces, the feel of the space that we're envisioning based on that design vision.
In terms of, I'll characterize what each zone will look like. So in terms of Zone 3, this area will be defined by landscape nooks for people to sit, relax, and enjoy the panoramic views of English Bay and the mountains. For Zone 8, there will be a fully accessible lookout platform with views to the Fraser River Delta and YVR. And this zone and both zones provide a number of amenities, so community gardens, washrooms, lighting, as you stated, and a suite of street furniture in addition as well. And considering when we look at lighting, it will be compliant with dark skies. In terms of the type of construction materials, it's very important to us that we have a hard surface so that is fully accessible for all residents. We're seeing amazing use out there right now because of our hard surface, and we'll be continuing that principle moving forward.
Thanks so much. Sorry, we're over time, so I don't do as good a job at interrupting politely as Mayor Stewart.
I'll weave it into somebody else's question.
But there you go. Councillor Fry and Council, we can consider a second round after.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and thank you for coming today, and I appreciate that the RFP has been awarded and this is work that's underway, and I'm sure that the consultants are fantastic and it's going to be an awesome looking project. And I appreciate all the work that you guys have been doing, engaging in the community with the community on this. I'm curious, what's the sort of consideration to bring in an outside consultant? Does that bringing in outside help impart kind of a premium? Do we have the capacity to otherwise do this work in-house? I know we have excellent staff, and could we otherwise be doing this design work in-house? And what would the cost difference be from doing it, say, in-house to bringing in a outside consultant at a premium?
Sure, thanks for the question. We certainly consider inside and outside in our delivery of our work for consulting services. Specifically for this project, it's really complementing our team, our internal team, to be able to deliver this. And so that's how it was framed in terms of developing the appropriate work plan for the work that's coming out. In terms of costs that you're asking, it's going to be in the same order of magnitude of what it would cost in-house, and for the relative scope. And we've been able to look at consultancies with some world-leading groups that have done this elsewhere, and bring in that expertise into our team and supplement our team.
And is this how typical is this as a practice for the department?
For our practice, we only do this, we have externals, consultancies, only for very specific projects that are very specialized.
Bridge design would be another one for our seismic design and structural design on our bridges. Construction is one where we're often flipping back and forth between external or internal based on market price. We just recently brought in work on the Cambie Bridge, construction work on the Cambie Bridge, where the market price was 50% more than our engineering estimates were. And City Crews delivered it for less than the engineering estimate. So depending on what the market is doing, we're seeing an awful lot of fluctuation in prices, more related to construction than on consulting. You're asking about consulting services, but I'm just saying the biggest peaks and valleys we're seeing now are on the construction side. On the consulting, it's more directed towards expertise, specific expertise, and just capacity.
Yeah, okay, I appreciate those answers, and yeah, we can go. I mean, I think looking forward, it would be great to see the options for how we could keep things in-house and maybe make those decisions, because I think we do have an excellent staff. We have the capacity to do a lot of this work, and I'd love to see us take full advantage of the staff that we have and the resources that we have as a city. And but thank you very much.
Is that all of your questions, Councillor Fry?
Yep.
Perfect. Councillor Wiebe, questions?
Yes, thank you very much for the report. Why don't we focusing on Section Zone 8 and the possibility of Section Zone 9? Have we looked at the scoping of Section 8 to include down to the Fraser River? I know that working with Musqueam, this has been a very important section to really create an Indigenous healing garden, maybe at the Marpole Heritage Place. I'm just wondering if that conversation is happening in this scoping.
Absolutely. Our team have, over the past number of months, been looking into progressing options to reach the Fraser River. We have been working very closely with Musqueam staff in terms of realising what that could look like. Musqueam will be engaging their own community on an option going within their area, and we hope to hear back about that in the next month or so. Should there be support, that could be a connection which could be constructed as early as late this year or early next year.
Amazing.
Thank you. And I have a quick question also just about accessibility. During construction and the lens that you're using for accessibility, and although I'm no longer the liaison, I understand it'll be Councillor Wiebe, the Persons with Disabilities Advisory Committee, just want to make sure that I'm asking ahead of time that they will be consulted and involved throughout the process.
Yes, absolutely, and accessibility is a fundamental criteria. And Councillor Carr had referenced earlier in her comments about a start and then a stop and then a reset that we did. And one of those fundamental questions was around the hardscape, the surface, whether we go with a hard surface or not, as Councillor Kirby-Young asked. And we went to the community and had a very explicit an extensive conversation about the surface, and what came back clearly was a desire for accessible hard surface. While there was support for lots of permeability and soft landscape along the corridor, from a transportation perspective, for people walking, it was even preferred that they're walking on a hard surface because we get so much rain that the crushed stone, limestone, gets dirty on people's pants and shoes. For people in wheelchairs or with mobility aids, they absolutely wanted a hard surface, and finally for cyclists as well, a greater degree of safety. So that's why we have a hard surface for the entire corridor now. We heard very clearly from the public safety and accessibility were their prime concerns as we were picking materials, and that's how we responded.
Thank you. I also had a question just surrounding the three different concepts and design areas that I heard in the previous question. Is there any room there for playground space or, for different, and when I mean playground space for children, but also being a former park board commissioner, I understand that, we also look at playgrounds that can be friendly to seniors for exercise. So hoping that you might be able to elaborate a little bit on that.
Absolutely. There will be a whole range of amenities with these two zones. Part of Zone 8 will actually look in terms of refreshing William Mackey Park. That's a part of this design contract as well. And we have a Parks Board staff member on our team to look at that. And in Zone 8, we will be looking at that with that refresh, looking at the playground as well. And looking at ways in terms of seniors who are out in this corridor can interact with people as well. So in terms of public realm, organising spaces and benches so people can interact with people and communities can get to know each other.
Thank you. And then just one more question during construction, understanding that there are many services, stores, shops in that area, and wondering if there's a plan for them during construction to make sure that that area is accessible for people, to make sure that we're not hearing that this is a hardship not only on businesses, but for instance, I think about cultural areas along the Greenway as well, schools and such.
Absolutely, that will be a key priority for us, that any alternative path will be fully accessible to people. And that's what this team will be helping us come up with. As we work through detailed design and understand what that looks like, they will be helping us and assisting us on what the construction can look like, that phased approach and those alternative routes.
Okay, thank you. And there will be communication, so you'll liaise with communication on that to make sure that that message is out there.
That is correct.
Great, thank you very much. Seeing no other speakers, do I have a motion from Council? Councillor Wiebe, you've moved the motion. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Really excited that this is coming forward, and I think that the lookout and the water components to aid are fantastic, and hopefully we can find funding to make it happen.
Great. All right. Well, seeing no one else on the queue, I will call for the vote on the motion moved by Councillor Wiebe, which are the staff recommendations before us. Okay. And we have, and the motion passes. All in favor except Councillor Hardwick, who we will record in opposition. Thank you very much. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you very much. Will be the standing committee portion. We'll vote on that. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. The standing committee portion of the meeting is now complete. We will now convene in regular council to pass not bylaws, but there are grants, I understand, that we need to formalize. So over to you, Mayor Stewart.
Thanks. So we'll now convene in regular council to deal with the recommendations and actions from today's Standing Committee on City Finance and Services meeting. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Stewart is in the chair. You have quorum, Mayor Stewart.
Thank you very much. We need a motion to adopt the committee's recommendations. Note items 2 and 3 require 2/3 affirmative vote of all council members. Thanks very much. Seconder? Councillor Boyle. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, so that's passed. So we need a motion to adjourn. Councillor DeGenova, second by Councillor Dominato. All in favor? Any opposed? We're good. So we're adjourned. Yeah.